Well, it's finally time for the big one, the albums. Albums are the quintessential format within the music industry. Just by saying the name, it can put fear, panic, or excitement into the minds of any producer. It can take years to craft an album, especially one that they are thoroughly proud of. As the backbone of the music industry, these collections of songs are what fuels producers and listeners alike. So as the year has officially come to a close, it's time to count down my top 10 EDM albums of 2022. Before we get going, just a reminder that EDM or electronic dance music is a fairly broad term and open to interpretation. So for this list, I'm counting anything that falls under EDM as something that's produced under or taken great influence from any of its subgenres. You've got house, synth pop, indie dance, electronica, trance, etc., all those kind of things. So without prolonging this intro any longer, let's jump into this list. A bit of meta commentary to start off here. It's a common structural tactic to start a list off with what people will agree with the most. Hook them in with something that is super popular that they know that will get their attention and keep them in. Then later on, put in the more obscure entries once you've got their attention and got them captivated. So I'm not going to do that. Even without that preamble, there is a significant number of those longtime fans of this channel that already know and love acloudyskye, and I wish more people knew about him. Producing some of the most intriguing, emotional, climactic music out there, acloudyskye's What Do You Want was a truly moving listening experience. Dancing the track list along is a pair of songs longer than 10 minutes each, acting as real chapter points for the record. Both tracks are exploratory in nature and act as their own mini stories within a greater narrative. But it was definitely Thief that stole the show for me. Landing in my honorable mentions for songs of the year, it's truly a masterclass in indie-tronica sound design. In the end, depending on who you are, this project has the potential to be a deeply profound listening experience. I personally appreciated the beauty and raw instrumentation of the project, culminating into a very real feeling experience. This album has a bit of a pseudo-experimental vibe to it, where the record doesn't fully lean into that raw experimental aspects or sounds, or even the ready-for-radio singles, but found itself seamlessly dancing between the two. There's a certain group that I've been very fond of for a long time now. Primarily producing chillwave with the mixture of electronica and the odd dream pop track, they've been a mainstay in the more chilled out side of EDM for almost a decade now. But this record was a little different. Still keeping their signature style and sound, they took a substantially more house approach to this newest album, and I thought it worked out wonderfully in their favor. ODESZA's The Last Goodbye is the biggest jump in production style throughout their career, opting in for a significantly more progressive house-inspired sound. But it's not something that's very easy to pick up on. They've done such a good job transferring over their subtle instrumentation to a new genre, and it's hard to actually really notice. But what I think lent itself best to the disguised shift was how much better house lends itself to longer songs. Both the title track and Light of Day are lavish multi-movement tracks that culminate into some of the most ambitious finales in their discography. Well, the first couple of listens left me slightly underwhelmed. As the year progressed, this was one of the few projects I found myself continually going back to time and time again. Of all the albums on this list, this is the one I think is the most subjective for me personally. It's still a solid record, but I've had such a rich history with ODESZA that's potentially clouding an unbiased review. Fred again absolutely took over the dance club scene this year with major collaborations and his iconic Boiler Room set. It's honestly refreshing to have seen dance music looked upon so delightfully this year. His sudden rise has been so crazy that there are jokes about him being an industry plant, which could very well be true. Honestly, club music got a huge resurgence this year thanks to Fred again. But you know what? That album isn't even going to make this list, because I think there's a certain someone else who made an even better dance club record this year. Sam's VF Volume 2 is the quintessential modern dance club mixtape, blurring the lines of genres as he bounces between future bass, French house, indie-tronica, trip-hop, really doing it all. Sam Gellaitry does a fantastic job of keeping tonal cohesion throughout the project, fighting the norms that mixtapes are all over the place. Similar sounds, melodies, and seamless transitions from track to track keep the energy high from start to finish. I'm really fascinated to see if this dance club trend will continue deep into 2023, as Sam is just a tad early to catch the popularity wave, and I'd love to see him receive some more recognition. Sam also played the Boiler Room 5 years before Fred Again's iconic mix, and now that that space has become a cultural icon, I'd love to see Sam tackle it again. There are a few names in the EDM world that hold significantly more weight than others. The ability to have a large commercial success and be adored by the EDM stands is a rare combo. So rare, in fact, that we didn't really have it for the past decade. Also, how insane is it that you can have your debut album be simultaneously your comeback? All the entries on this list, this is one that I have the most mixed feelings about. I don't really think this is as stellar of a record to be on here, but you can't undermine the influence and effect on music culture this project had in 2022. Is this the most polished, well put together album? Not really. But is it so freaking fun and carefree you just don't care about deeply analyzing it because you are so entranced by each track? Hell yeah. This is one of the first times in years I have truly understood pop fiends. It's like this record just had a spell over me saying, no, don't overanalyze it. Just enjoy it. No, but seriously, this is a solid record. House had its fair share of big albums this year, and I truly believe Paradise Again paved the way for other records to shine this year. And come on, the singles on this thing were fantastic. Moth to a Flame, Lifetime, It Gets Better. This is surely Swedish House Mafia at their best. Now, just to see if we have to wait another 10 years for another album. There are certain times with an album where individually some of the tracks are so good that it makes up for other shortcomings of the record. This next entry was definitely the definition of that for me. Overall, I wouldn't say it's the most strong album, but man, in a vacuum, some of these songs are just so good that it's hard not to love this thing. Having pioneered a mixture of future bass and wonky sounds for the core EDM audience, Flume's reach for commercial success has expanded even further this year. But despite the odd dud in the track list, Palaces has a lot of individually remarkable tracks. Escape, Sirens, Palaces, I Can't Tell, Say Nothing, all classic Flume tracks. Glitchy production, grand builds, and key vocal features all play supporting roles in the excellence of each of these songs. Forgetting about his 2019 mixtape, this is a natural progression in Flume's sound from his last album and 2016's Skin. Flume is walking a fine line with his production where he's very clearly aiming for those radio plays, yet is trying to stay true to the sound design that put him on the map. In the end, I couldn't help but put Palaces here on this list. While the umbrella term of EDM has expanded so much over the last couple years, you don't often see genuine pop artists take a real stab at a purely EDM record. Crossover between genres is higher than ever, but to really go out and make something unarguably electronic is a tall task. I really do think that without Swedish House Mafia's comeback, this record wouldn't have been as greatly received by the masses. They brought solid house music back into this year's docket, fostering in the success of others to come after it. And boy, did this album ever see success. Across all of your year-end lists from critics, one album reigned supreme, and it blew everything else out of the water. Beyoncé decided that she was done dominating just pop and R&B and wanted to conquer some new territory. Renaissance is by far the greatest dance pop and house record of 2022. I always wondered what an EDM album would sound like if it had the monetary backing that all the big pop artists have. But I guess we don't have to wonder anymore. With production assistance from the likes of Skrillex and Mike Dean, the production quality of this record is through the roof. The beats are surprisingly simplistic, making for an album that's quite palatable and an earworm. And obviously because it's a Beyoncé record, the reach in which this album had makes for potentially one of the furthest reaching house and dance pop records to date.
It's not the time.
And obviously on top of the stellar production, Beyoncé's vocal performances are masterful. The range, tempo, and tone she uses throughout this record gives the already thick project some much needed diversity. I really love when artists have their own niche, when they sound like themselves and no one else. You know that they've succeeded in carving out their own little section of the music industry when that happens. But doing so is incredibly hard. Music has been a part of humanity since the beginning, and it's honestly insane to me that we are still making new music. So let's take a moment to appreciate those that are keeping EDM truly fresh. Gent has always amazed me with his unique sound design, keeping his already niche sound continually so interesting. Not many artists have shown up time and time again with original tunes, always mixing and matching new inspirations with old nostalgia. On top of it all, Planet Oasis is a diverse record that's so playful. This album feels like the Star Wars Cantina in a way. I just always imagine a bunch of aliens from all over the galaxy jamming to this album together in a space club of sorts. This record also has a ton of individual star power within it, but not by its features, by its song style. Because the project had a slew of singles released over a relatively long period of time than most album cycles, there are a ton of really engaging on-repeat tracks. I would be hard-pressed to find someone that doesn't like at least a couple songs from this track list. Gent has continually proved himself to be a pioneer in the EDM scene. His carefree sound design and high-quality production is a 1-2 combo that is so rarely found with the success that he's had. There's a certain style of EDM-influenced projects that I've always had an affinity for, and those are the kind of synth-pop, indie-tronica, sort of ethereal records. Artists like Former Hero, Wave Dash, and Underscores all fall into this bright experimental soundscape. But this year, a new artist landed on my radar with a debut LP that was surely going to be up my alley. Released early in 2022, I very honestly put off listening to this project for so long, and in hindsight, I deeply regret doing so. Jaron brings a very shimmering and radiant production to this debut album, It's Hard to See Color. So many tracks throughout the runtime stretch into deep narratives, all backed by joyous beats and flashy synth licks. This record is another one that doesn't fall too neatly into that EDM umbrella, but is more of a glitch or art pop style. But that being said, it still feels right at home surrounded by the likes of a Porter Robinson or Jai Wolf. I love experiential listening records like this one, projects you really need to just sit down with no distractions and let the music take you on a journey. But what I think truly makes this album so special is that based on your listening experience, it can vastly change what you get out of the album. There are tracks in here that I can throw onto the background and just vibe to, and then singles I can belt out in the car, and yet still long expansive tracks that I can just sit and soak in. The ability to craft such a multifaceted record on a debut endeavor is truly special. I can't wait to see what the future holds for Jaron. The penultimate record. Well, just not my favorite album of the year. I think this next record did more for EDM than anything else. And just like his career, we're just gonna hop into things right away. IMANU's Unfold is the cleanest, most innovative, polished album in EDM this year, and it's not really even close. While primarily residing within drum and bass, Unfold treks through a variety of genres and sounds, tackling the glitch of a Flume or the intensity of the likes of Noisia, yet intertwines all the styles so seamlessly you wouldn't know this is a debut album. I'm not sure I've seen a breakout artist be so universally treasured as quickly as he has. drum and bass had a really strong year in 2022, and that's largely in part to this record. Despite all the other solid drum and bass projects out there, IMNAU keeps the genre fresh and engaging with a wonkier twist to it all. With a darker atmosphere and some laid-back beats, Unfold is showing the music world that he's going to change the game. I know for a fact that we will look back fondly on this album and note it as a classic. When this debut album is what you compare others to, you've cemented your legacy. And just before we hit the #1 spot, you know what time it is. It's time for the honorable mentions, records that were so good, but just didn't quite land in my top 10.
It's going down.
Okay, it's time to close it out and move on to what I believe to be the top EDM album of 2022. This top pick is definitely a bold choice to round off this list, but I couldn't have thought of a more deserving #1 spot. Leaning more into the alternative dance side of things, I had this album on repeat all throughout 2022, blending together a mixture of intense, grungy beats and more relaxing synth and guitar ballads. This was a no-brainer.
And what comes next? Probably pigs in the sky if I had to guess.
Grabbitz has been teetering the line of dance, alternative, electro, rock, and dubstep ever since venturing away from producing explicitly electronic music. This style is so unique and all over the place that you never know what you're gonna get with every new release. Everything on this tracklist will either smack you upside the head or invade your core. Grabbitz does a dance of pushes and pulls throughout not only individual tracks, but the tracklist order itself. The album feels like a polished piece of raw sounds that combine for a truly gripping 40-minute experience. As a holistic year, 2022 has been Grabbitz's for sure. Late 2021 saw the release of his biggest song yet, the Die For You track in partnership with Valorant, and he's been riding the wave of that success into an absolutely phenomenal 2022. And even after the release of Time Isn't Real, he's been putting out singles that still match the style and soundscape of this record. Time Isn't Real has officially become more than just an album. It's an era. 2022 may have been a pretty crap year, all things considered, but at least we got some killer albums out of it. Now, let's see what 2023 has to offer.